block third-party content now on mobile devices. So that's why if you have had a problem playing the messages on your YouTube, if you're using it or sending it out to friends, some of them have to be played on a full computer, but by changing my format, you get it. But the song is, "Who Are You?" And I use that coupled with the scriptures that you have today for a whole lot of reasons. They're really interesting. The image of Jeremiah talking about God as the potter is not new to us as Christians. How many people have heard it before? And we love the wonderful image of God shaping us into who we are. But there is a problem with that, and I'm going to come to that in a moment. And the problem is what Jesus is referring to in his speech to his followers, and what Paul is talking about when he's speaking with depending on which class of theology you talk to, he's Philemon or Philemon. You pick the name you want to use. But with Phil, I call him Philemon. With Philemon, it's a wonderful letter, and I'm going to come to that too. There's three pieces here. But I'm going to start with the song, "Who Are You?" Because it asks the question, do I know who I am? Do I know who I am? And the singer of the song says, I really want to know. Well, most of us want to know who we are, and we'd love to know who the people around us are. And most of us like to think that we can be shaped or reshaped in life. I had a time to think about this, and this week I had an interesting experience in that I was going down the road, and I was actually in my car listening to the radio. Or was I on the bike? I can't remember which now. But anyway, I was listening to the Currents on CBC Radio. And they were interviewing a gentleman who had done a study in the States of 49-year-olds who were facing the year 50. And what a trauma it was for them, because they were now having to realize that life was more than half over, and that they weren't likely, and this is his words, to ever be able to reinvent themselves. That they had to accept all the limiting conditions of their life. You got to know that when I heard that, I was screaming at the radio. Because I had just left the hospital room of a woman about to turn 91 who broke her leg, had just gone through major surgery, and had a rod inserted in the whole lower part of her leg so that in 6 to 8 weeks she may be able to stand up again, according to the doctor. And when I left, she was in her bed doing exercises to strengthen her muscles and body because she was not going to have anything shut her down. She'll be back to walking her 4 kilometers a day and going out for coffee with her friends and neighbors. She figures in about 3 to 4 weeks. And I'm going to meet her after church today, because it's my mother-in-law I'm talking about. And her 93-year-old brother is driving down from Peterborough this afternoon to visit with his baby sister. No, he's a good driver. I just won't let him on my bike because he used to race them. So what's the difference in a 49-year-old who thinks life is finished and a 90-year-old who believes it's just beginning? What's the difference? Attitude. And that's what the rest of your scriptures today were about. We're about attitude. Jesus is telling you, you have to get rid of all the things in your life. And of course, being good Christians, we dutifully assume that means all of my possessions. And of course, there's wonderful, wonderful stories of all the ascetic communes around the world where people have eschewed all of the worldly goods and gone off to live in whatever hair shirt poverty they feel like, because that makes them a better person. Except they just acquired another attitude that just limits them the same as everything else. It isn't what you own that matters. It's what owns you that matters. It's what owns you that matters. It's what attitudes you own. Are the possessions that important to you that they control your life? Yes, you might want to get rid of them. But it's that attitude that says, I cannot be shaped or reshaped. I heard a wonderful story this week in a commentary of a minister in the States who on the sermon was doing a sermon on that Jeremiah scripture about God shaping and reshaping. And while he was doing it, he had a friend of his who was a potter standing right next to him throwing pots while he's preaching on the gospel, on that Old Testament lesson. And the guy's throwing pots, and as they're starting to harden, like he's got different ones he's working on, as they're starting to harden, as that clay is getting hard, he's reshaping it and showing that no matter how hard it gets, it can be reshaped all the way through. Years later, he was talking to some people who had seen that presentation and heard that presentation. And what he found out was that none of them could remember a word he said, but they all remembered the potter reshaping the pots and throwing the clay and taking the hardened clay and making something new out of it, or using it in a new way. Paul wrote a letter from jail to his friend Philemon, and he was talking about a guy named Onesimus. Now Onesimus was actually Philemon's slave who had run away. And Onesimus was considered by Philemon to be useless. That's what you heard in the script in the lesson, right? And the letter is actually a play on a whole lot of things, including the fact that the word for useless, or the word for useful in Greek is Onesimus. The guy's name was useful. And he was not seen as useful by his owner. He was not given any sense of credibility for being the person he was. So he left. Go figure. Don't appreciate me here? Going someplace where they appreciate me. I don't care if you own me or not. You don't own me. Nobody owns me. And what Paul is talking about is that relationship that Onesimus has with God, that he could not allow him to forget his usefulness and his willingness to be made use of in this world, even when other people wouldn't recognize it. And Paul goes on to talk about how useful Onesimus is to him and how he is useful to the community and his value and place in the community. And he's asking, what's he asking Philemon for? It's a test. Were you listening? Take him back. A lot of people will say to free him, to give him his independent status. Not once was that asked for. Never asked for. As a matter of fact, it's implied that Paul is actually saying, I could command you to do that, but I'm not. Because I can't tell you what attitude to have. I can't tell you what attitude to have. You've got to find that yourself. I can present you with the possibilities. I can show you what potentials there are. But what you think and feel about them, that's between you and God. God really is the potter. God's the one who presents us with all the possibilities of attitude and potential in our life. God's the one who looks at us at the moment of our birth and at the moment of our death and at every moment in between and says, you are my beloved child, in you I do believe. In you I see all potential, now and forever. It's we who limit it. Oh, I couldn't do that. Nobody would like that. I'm too frightened to do that. Look at those people. They disgust me because they don't do things my way. Sound familiar? They dress different. They have a different creed, they have a different culture, they have a different this, they have a different that. And we let our attitudes harden like that clay. And we think that when the clay breaks, it's a tragedy. Went into a home one time. They had the most beautiful countertop I had ever seen. Seriously, it was just a stunning work of art. It was all mosaic. It was just absolutely beautiful. Come to find out that the homeowner, it was every clay pot she'd ever had that had broken. It's just an opportunity to make something new out of it. You know, I learned a long time ago, sometimes it's not what you do, it's how you do it that matters. These scriptures are about knowing who you are. Not who other people say you are. Onesimus was useful even though Philemon thought he was useless. It's not about how broken you may be. It's not about how disappointed you've been in life. These scriptures are about what's your potential today. What have you allowed to limit yourself? One of the great myths of the Christian faith is that it's about family. And you got to hear me when I say this, because you know I am about family. I believe in family, but it's an offshoot of my faith. It's not driven. It's not a primary premise of my faith. My faith is really about one thing. It's about me and God and my relationship there. And if I have that relationship in its direct link, then the rest of the stuff comes. And that's what Jesus was saying. You have to get rid of these attitudes that we have that hold us back. My family is important to me, to the point that I treasure every moment I spend with them. It doesn't stop me from getting on an airplane and leaving them half a world away so I can go and do something with somebody else's family. Because that's important too. It's all a part of what you take in your relationship with God and where you carry it to. But we allow other things to define us. I can't leave here. I'm from here. I'm this. I'm that. My job. Years and years ago, I started running grief support groups. And I learned in them that when I would do counseling with people, that what would happen is that we who have gone through tragic grief find ourselves broken and not able to function or cope. We're missing stuff. We're missing the connection to the lost, to whatever we've lost. And when I say grief support groups, I mean, what causes grief in your life? We think death. You've lost a spouse, you've lost a parent, a child. That's one cause of grief. Relocating, losing your job, forced to retire. My friend moved away. I lost my dog. My favorite car died on the highway, and I had to bury it in an auto compound. It all sounds crazy, but anything that causes that kind of change causes grief. And it's because we've attached ourselves, our sense of being, in those relationships, and we no longer know who we are. So I've often just watered it all down to this. Tell me who you are. Tell me who you are, but you cannot use any job you have ever done, any relationship you have ever been in, any hobby you have ever had, or anything you have ever owned to define that. And it cannot be used in the sentence to describe who you are. Now tell me who you are. It can be done. It can be done. But it begins with you. It begins with you, and it ends with God. And when you have that relationship in place, then you realize that you can be reshaped any day, any given day, in any way that your life opens up to all the possibilities of it. You're no longer hardened. Jesus presented a living example of someone who espoused what we would call all the Christian values of the faith. Primary relationship with God, a family man, a tight group of friends and a coterie of people that traveled with him. But if you asked his family about that, they would say different. In his culture, family was everything. And the eldest son, the firstborn, abandoning the family business at 30 to go and wander as a preacher. Mark 3. His family are coming to him and saying, stop this nonsense. Come home now. We need you. He's a man who reshaped his life based on his primary relationship with God. A man who is willing to allow change in and blow through his life and to hold on to what was true and dear to him. And he never lost his sense of his family. He never lost his sense of his faith. And he never, well, some will argue that on the moment of the cross, but we'll come back to that later at Easter. But he kept his act together and never saw himself as being finished. So I would prefer to take my lessons in life from a 90-year-old who will do exercises in her bed to get back on the track than a brilliantly educated person in the States who does all kinds of sociological studies and feels that he's washed up at 50. What's your choice? Who are you? Where's life taking you? Do you see this as the roller coaster ending at the station and you're getting off? Or you see yourself getting ready for the next round? Because I can promise you that the end of 2013 and through 2014, the roller coaster that you call Cataraqui is going to go in full steam ahead. Who are you? Are you ready for the ride? Are you ready for all the opportunities we are going to have to live and to love and to share and to grow and to be reshaped? Because that's what's in front of us. And do you know what you call that? Do you know what you call that? You call it life. Life with faith lived together.